So this is today's keynote, and I was very pleased to invite, and he accepted, an entrepreneur of mine from the old days, Riccardo Zacconi, and we'll tell you the story of how we met. Well, he'll tell you the story of how we met and some adventures we had. For those of you who don't know what King.com is, I'm sure many of you have played Candy Crush or know about it. It's probably resident on your phone. The company was sold for almost $6 billion to Activision earlier in 2016. Riccardo founded the company, developed the company, 1,400 employees around the world, a fantastic entrepreneur, and I'd like you to hear his story.
We're actually now 2,200. Well, first of all, thank you, George, for inviting me. Without George, I would not be here. Very simple.
Non è vero.
I would not exist. No, I mean, George Busy is the guy who brought me over to London. I was before somewhere in Germany, and with an offer which was spectacular at the time, which I thought was absolutely impossible. At first, actually, I refused the offer first. I thought it was not real. It was basically a program called Entrepreneur in Residence, where they give you a salary. It was £100,000, a lot of money at the time, also now. And 1 year to find a new business idea. It was the most stressful time in my life because I had nothing to do. And I learned one thing from George, which was really precious for the rest of my life, which is when you want to judge an investment or something, you always look at one thing and only one thing, which is people. And you trashed all the business plans, but you always looked at people and you really investigated, and you're an incredible judge of people. Incredible connector.
Well, I picked you, so I'm probably pretty good.
No, I'm not just, but you picked many good people. So thank you, George, for inviting me, and I would go anywhere when you were called.
Tell us what happened at King. How did you found it? I heard it was originally Swedish. Later on, I'll ask you the story of how we went up to see Mel Morris, and later I've connected with Martin Clifford again.
Great. So let me start from the full. Then I start from the beginning. It's probably easier. So I started this program with George and EIR, and then I came in with 50 ideas. One of these ideas was to do online dating, because in a previous company called Spray, where I met the other founders, we developed one of the products was dating, but it was a free dating site, which we sold eventually to Lycos Europe. And it was free, so we didn't make any money. But when I had time to reflect, when I was at Benchmark, actually I saw that there are companies like Match, we're talking about 2002 now, which made a lot of money. And so we looked into different ways to enter into this market. One was to study from the scratch, one was to invest in an existing company. And George was at the time, he founded Benchmark in Europe. And so it's either go big or go bust. And so we tried to go big, and we made an offer to a company called UDate in the UK. And my task was to bring the company to Europe. And then they made me an offer to join the company. So I said, George, if you don't mind, I would join this company. So I'm sorry for that. So I joined them, and I had no money before, and that's where I made my first money. So we sold the company after 4 months after I joined. I made some money there, and that's how we started King.
How much was that company sold? 300 million.
No, it was less actually. I think it was about, it was actually sold in shares of IAC, Interactive Corp. I think it was worth about $120 million, but then the share price went up. So I think it was at the end of something like $160 million. But my share was very small because I just started, but it was enough. So I made about 300,000 pounds, I think, something like that. And then we started busy 6 people. I was one of the 6, and I met the other guys in a previous company called Spray. Spray was a Swedish startup where we grew from 20 people to 800 people in 1 year back in 1999. We made all the mistakes you can do, but we had incredible learnings and fun. I did one of the biggest parties in my life, just to give an example, spending a lot of money. So those are things which we didn't do anymore. But one of the key things was the ambition of growing something at a global level. So it was we had an investment of $100 million back in 1999. We grew from 20 to 800 in 1 year, so we learned how to scale fast, making many mistakes. And those are learnings which were very important. But the most important learning from the time was to meet the other founders. And those were some of the brightest guys from those 800 people. So the CTO of Spray became then the CTO of King. The chief architect of Spray became the chief architect of King. And one of the best developers who was there also became the lead developer. So we were 6 people, but the guys from Intech were amazingly good. Also, the chief creative officer of Spray became the chief creative officer of King. So very few people, but very dense talent. And then we launched the website we were on the web in August of 2003. It was an idea which was new at the time in Europe, was not new on a global scale, but was new in Europe. And we almost went bust after, basically, we started launched in August. We went almost bust in December of 2003. We went almost bust because it was very tough at the time to find financing. It was a time where web was not very sexy. And we managed to close financing only in the very last moment through the CEO and founder of UDate. And there are also some funny stories behind it, but I will not go into those. And then from there it went well, because then we signed a deal with Yahoo and in Europe first, and then they asked us to expand because the products were doing really well, to also take over the key placement on Yahoo in the US. And on the back of that contract, in 2005, we brought on board 2 institutional investors with Apex and Index Ventures, and that's where we suddenly went from a company which was small, tiny, to a company which was worth 65 million euros, which at the time for us was an incredible accomplishment, especially because this was based on this contract with Yahoo, but more importantly on having become profitable in January of 2005. We were still very few people, about 20 people. And then we grew from there. We grew the company. We scaled it to about $40–50 million in revenues in 2009. So everything was really, really good. And that's where I faced the most difficult time in my life in 2009, where suddenly this growth was interrupted, almost basically overnight. This was when Facebook started growing really fast. If you go on Alexa, which is a tool to measure traffic on websites, and you enter Facebook growth, you see that in 2009 is the year where Facebook suddenly grew by exponentially, and our key partner Yahoo lost 45% of its traffic in games, which was where we were present, in 1 year. And it was so bad that for us it felt as if someone had taken the ground under our feet. And that's where we had to restructure the company. That's where we reinvented ourselves, and we reinvented our offering to go on Facebook. So it took us about 2 years to get there. And we went first to Facebook, and then a year later we launched on mobile. We launched on mobile in November 2012. Our second game we launched on mobile was Candy Crush, and the growth there was so exponential. You have to imagine, we did a business plan in October of 2012, approved it with the board, and we launched Candy Crush in November. By the end of December, we had already achieved the entire business plan, the targets of the business plan for the next year. So boom, in 1 month. Yeah. And so then we had a new challenge, which was to grow. How do we grow? How do we scale the company? We were at the time about 250 people. We grew from 100 before we launched on Facebook to 250 when we launched on mobile. But now we had to grow faster to take this opportunity. And so we scaled from about 250 people in the beginning of 2013 to now 2,200 people. And so we basically doubled the size of our team every 6 months. And to do that was a new challenge. We were before, the development was only in Stockholm, and in London, I was in London, we had marketing and legal and finance, etc. So we had to grow the development. And Stockholm is an amazing market for talent, but too small to scale at that kind of speed. You don't find enough good developers and good creative guys. So we had then to set up new locations. So we set up new locations in the world. Today we have 12 locations. And the only reason for that is not to distribute, but is only to attract the best people we can find around. And so we introduced processes for scaling with quality. So every person goes through 6 interviews. If one person says no, the person is out. And we have our acceptance rate, we are proud of that, is actually lower than Harvard. So it's more difficult to come in King than entering Harvard. Yeah, so that's 2%. Yeah, it's around 2%. Yeah. So that's basically where we are, more or less. And then as George was saying before, we went public on the New York Stock Exchange in March of 2014. An incredible experience. For those who want to would, it's actually we had the chance to ring the bell. Oh, ciao Matteo. So we know. And so when the bell is actually, it's a red thing. It's a red button. You press the button, and that's where the stock exchange suddenly goes on in the morning. It's quite fun. But it was a less fun moment because actually we had a pretty bad IPO. But anyway, those are these moments in life. I think life is made out of moments you remember. This is one of these moments. And then we went through a very interesting phase of learning what does it mean to be a public company. It's a returning business. This means you talk to investors and that you meet every quarter. So you have to be very careful in what you say. You have to be more conservative than optimist. And so that's a relationship you start building over time. And we've been working really hard to build products and quality, because Candy Crush was a very an amazing game, but then how you continue from there. And so we've built a lot of, of those 2,020 people, most of them today are working on innovation on new things. And then we sold the company in March. Whether we knew Activision Blizzard for many years, there has been a relationship behind. And I think now we're in an incredible position because of the size of the group, but especially because of the amazing game IPs they have in the group that are not yet on mobile. And we have a huge mobile user base. We have more than 400 million players playing our games every month. So there are big opportunities there to take these games on mobile. So sorry, I spoke too long.
Fantastic. That's exactly what you want. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it's like to be public on the major exchange in the world, one of the two, New York Stock Exchange, and any regrets? Many people here have not had the experience of being
Well, I mean, first of all, I want to make money for all people who believe in me and invest. So unfortunately, we didn't make money for all the people because we went public for a valuation of about $7 billion, and we sold at 5.9. But we also had a lot of dividends in between, so actually the differential was not as big. But some people who invested afterwards actually did make a lot of money, in fact. I think that ultimately it was, for me personally, it was an incredible experience. I would have never dreamt in my life to be CEO of a public company on the New York Stock Exchange. And the only way to do that was to bring on board, since I was a first-time CEO of a public company, was to bring on board people who are actually the best in the area. So I brought on board a CFO who was already CFO of a public company. I learned a lot from her. And ultimately, the most important thing is to be very truthful. So in the same way as you're truthful to your team or to your shareholders, to investors, you have to be truthful to the markets. The only challenge there is that you have to be also careful that every time you tell how are things going, you can't be too transparent in terms of products and the future, because you have also listening on the earnings calls your competitors. So that's a bit the fine balance you need to keep. But I think for me personally, it was an incredible experience again to learn new things and to grow personally.
I remember your role originally, right? And you went to school here. And has anything changed in the tech scene here? What do you think of it? And what can we do to boost the scene, which is obviously what these few days are about?
Yeah. So I'm very proud to be Italian, number one, and I think that I think in life you always need to live. I think every person has the task to live the world a bit better than before. So if you have more means, you have to do more. And so what I'm trying now to do is my trying to give back is, I think there is one area where Italy needs to. I'm not saying to change is wrong, but I think there's a bit more work to be done. It's my feeling. I don't know the tech scene in Italy well enough, so I might be wrong on this. But my feeling is that Italy is a bit stuck in the middle. By stuck in the middle, I mean that I think the Italian market is big enough that when you start a startup, you focus on the Italian market. And startups have to be pragmatic. The most important thing is to bring on board money now, to feed your people, to become profitable, etc. So it's a very pragmatic approach. Now, the dangerous thing is if you start immediately with the focus on Italy, then you develop a product for Italy. That's where your energies are focused on. You build a product which is competitive for Italy. But if you then want, and a couple of years later, when you have the time and you want to expand further, you want to become competitive on a global level, then number one, you might find out that actually you don't know how to do it. Number two, you have a product and offering which is not competitive on a global level. Because, for example, you called your product vino.it or whatever, right? So it's an Italian product. It's difficult to bring it outside. And by the time, it's actually not new anymore. There's someone else doing it. And if I compare that to how we started in Sweden, in Stockholm. Now, why are there so many startups on a global scale that actually are successful from Sweden or from the Nordics? In the mobile, most startups which are very successful actually are from the Nordics, because those markets are too small. So no one who starts a startup in Sweden or Finland would ever dream to have an offering focused only on Sweden or Finland, because it's too small. So from day one, they launch immediately in many markets. We launched from day one in 4 languages, from day one. And after a few months, we had 6 languages. And I was immediately working on the Spanish, on the German market, and on the English market, and of course on the Swedish. And I think Italians, for me, if I manage to help a bit on this, basically to create the ambition from day one to focus on a global market, which doesn't have to be the world, it can be also Europe. But Europe for me is the minimum scale. The minimum ambition has to be Europe. If you grow in Europe, we became big in Europe. We scaled in Europe, that's where we became profitable and became of a size and had the product which was better than other products. And then from Europe, when we already had scale, we then went over to the US. Ideally, the best step is to go straight to the US from here. But I think, I think for me, the purpose of this conference, or this conference in general, is, hey, when you start a company, your ambition has to be from day one, not just Italy, but a bigger market. Europe is the smallest one.
Are you seeing other quality entrepreneurs in the brief times you come back to Italy? And do you see things happening here and people want to follow the same journey that you made?
I haven't met many entrepreneurs, but I met many companies which are accelerators for entrepreneurs. I see a lot of enthusiasm. I see structures which are absolutely amazing, where I say, wow, for example, we went to see Fabrizio in Venice, and amazing structures. I met now before with P Capital, and I look forward to go there. So I think there are amazing structures here. So I think there are opportunities for startups to start in a less painful way than we did at the beginning. So I think the infrastructure is there. It's more, I think that once you want to scale, I think it's absolutely important to have access to a wider pool of investors than just the Italians. And you can only do that if you have a global or a wider ambition. Then the valuations are much higher, the access to investors is much bigger. But I look forward to meet more really cool Italian startups.
Mel Morris was a mentor to you, kind of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember when we first went to see him, and we were in my new Volvo, and I ran out of petrol?
Yeah.
And it was a bit of stress for, I guess, both of you and Robert, your colleague, maybe also for me, embarrassment of running out of fuel so quickly. But what do you think then? You must have thought I was nuts. Well, I am, but.
It was a very amazing experience. I sat in the back and George was driving, and suddenly the car stops. And I knew that George was a fan of historic cars, but I never knew it. But you mastered any challenge, so it was really interesting to see how you master any issue with a cool head. So I think I never felt any moment in time the pain of, or the issues I knew we would get there somehow, and you solved everything. So.
Well, you talked about picking people, and do you remember when we looked at due date together, and I said, well, we have to all go on dates. And I'll keep it clean, the story. We only went on dates. I went on a date, you went on a date, and Robert went on a date, and you went to a party as well.
Oh my God, yeah.
So doing real due diligence makes sense. What did you learn from that experience?
Well, you have to imagine. So I became an expert in dating. I was busy on most dating sites. I was not married, I have to say at the time, so it was fine. It was not a big deal. And it was actually fun. And the most incredible experience was at due date. We started also organizing real physical parties. So you basically, how it works is you had a nickname on the website on due date, and then you would have here a badge with your nickname, and then you would go to a party and meet people in real life. And we organized this party in the center of London, and suddenly I had a girl who approached me, never happened before by the way, so it's not that I'm used to that, never happened before, approached me and said, hey, hi, my nickname is, I don't know, Angel. What's your nickname? And so she wrote down my nickname and then she disappeared. So in normal life you would just talk to each other, but it's an environment where actually talking to each other is much more painful in real life, because talking on a digital platform, you can talk very straight, You can go straight to the question, hey, what are you doing, and how much money do you make, or what are your preferences, right? These kind of things. And so I was kind of shocked, saying, hey, wait a second, we're here. Why don't we just, interact a bit? And she disappeared. And then she immediately contacted me on a digital device. But I think the key learning there, and this is not the first time that we saw that, is that communities on digital are really where people express themselves as they really are in a much more truthful way. So you will see when you're in a community that people can become their real self. So you might have, for example, a person who you think is a woman, but actually it's not a woman, might be a man, but actually the person feels like a woman. So that's where they can express themselves, etc., etc. Unfortunately, I didn't have that experience, but I think the digital life is something which goes beyond conformity, and it's very interesting.
Can I switch to ask you what's next in gaming? VR, there's a lot of hype and things. AI, there's a lot of hype. Can you comment on anything?
Sure. I think first of all, I think that Pokemon Go was a great success. I was very happy for that because it proves again that if you are creative, it's never game over. Right? So if you are creative, you come up with something which is really new, you can always break through markets which people think are mature. So now the mobile ecosystem is more mature than it once was. So like Facebook was at the beginning, it was very easy to grow on a growing platform like Facebook. Then when the platform became more mature, it was much more difficult. We had to spend money to grow on it. Same thing with mobile much easier to grow with a growing mobile platform. Now the mobile platform is more mature than once it was. There is much more competition. There are more than 2 million apps on the store. If you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars every year in marketing, and still Pokemon Go didn't spend a penny, and they became basically a huge game company, a huge success. Now, what is the trend going forward? What do I believe? It depends very much on the category of games you do. So our games are called casual. The graphics is less relevant versus the game experience, the challenge, the core. We call it core gameplay. The mechanics. So for our category of games, VR is less important. I think AR is very interesting. I believe a lot that I think AR can be a very interesting application, but AR combined with local. I think local is one of the key reasons why I think Pokemon Go is actually really also taking off, where you see other people in real life. One area where we are working on is reinventing the way how you play with others. So making games really truly social. I don't think we're there yet. In terms of VR, I'm a bit more skeptic. I know there's a lot of money currently invested in the area, but I think that there's still an issue with the user experience because the signal which the brain gets from the eyes and from the physical movement of the body, there is a disconnect. And I think that you can have some experiences. For example, if you have a fishing game, it's fine. But as soon as you move, you cannot play for hours. You can play maybe for 5 minutes. At least I feel sick after a while. So I think there are some challenges there which are not purely technical challenges.
So we've come to the end of our time, Riccardo. We are all so grateful, those of us who want to promote entrepreneurship in Italy, and especially in the technology sector, for you to come down from London and spend some time with us and give us some enlightenment and inspire the next generation of us. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, George. I think you are inspired.